This Bitcoin privacy advocate is leveraging Solana Degens traders to increase Bitcoin's anonymity set. Yes, you heard that right. I've got Janusz of Lemondrop joining me for Bitcoin Season 2 today on an episode we recorded a couple weeks ago at ETH Denver. Bitcoin Season 2 is brought to you by Arch.network, the platform for building bridgeless apps on Bitcoin. More on Arch later on in the show. Let's kick it off. Okay, I'm here with Janusz in Denver, Colorado at the Space.
Yeah.
Janusz, is funny because I think my first introduction to you was as a small random account on Twitter.
Okay.
Because I was trying to wrap my head around the world of like Bitcoin L2s during the L2 explosion of like a year or two ago. And you were the only coherent people. Why in the world were you one of the few people talking about this early on?
Okay, so like I really care about anonymous payments, and I think blockchains in general are only really useful for that, like censorship resistant payments. And that includes things like, for example, like ordinals, right? Like you have the ability to like do these transactions. Everyone runs this like software that they all like socially agree on, and like that's like, and you have the censorship resistance of the L1 to be able to do that. And people can't stop you. Like as long as you're willing to pay the fees to get your transaction included, I think that's how things work. So that's what I really care about. So I've always really cared about this idea of bringing like a Zcash style transaction execution layer to Bitcoin to provide like anonymous payments. So I started following John Light from Alpine Labs. I started following their work, a couple like 3 or 4 years ago. A few other engineers that are at the Alpine team, some other places. And they started like presenting this idea that we could do this thing called rollups, right, on top of Bitcoin, that could potentially provide a trust minimized way to be able to offer these types of transaction execution layers. So I started writing a blog, just like a community blog on Bitcoin rollups. It's bitcoinrollups.io. And then all the rollup people DM'd me and they're like, by the way, man, you should do this like review site thing as well, because there's all these projects that are calling themselves Bitcoin ZK rollups. And you and I both know that's not possible. So we should probably look into that. And from there, I just started it started on Twitter. I would just tweet. I would go into a projects like docs or like maybe look at their like code a little bit and like just tweet what it actually was. Like I would just literally in a longer draft like form, I would just say, this is how it actually works. And they would do numbers because people were like, what the hell? Like, It's just like a completely centralized like server running somewhere in some box. So that's how it all started. And from there, I think a lot of people just wanted a little bit more transparency in the space. And that's kind of what motivated me to start the Bitcoin Layers project. And
we can talk a little bit about the Bitcoin Layers, but that is now kind of sidecarred to the main thing now, which I just want to get right into before we get too far into this, which is you've recently pivoted.
Mm-hmm. We did. Yeah.
The Layers project. What's the TLDR on the pivot and what does this pivot look like?
Yeah. So there's a lot of really confusion in the beginning. So Bitcoin Layers is a open source project under an MIT license. Like anyone can actually take our code. They can take our site, fork it and make their own version and market their own version. If they want to build a business on that, they're more than welcome to, or they can just contribute back to the core repository. The original idea for us when we first got this going was to like build a research style kind of business. And a couple of things were there. Like one that doesn't, from like going out to VCs and stuff, we found that like it's really hard to scale that. From like a monetary perspective and really like not only trying to become like a self-sustaining business, but also like make sure that investors like make their money back and then some. So like we were kind of just thinking of like, is this the long-term direction we want to go as a company? So we were just like brainstorming some ideas and then we kind of looked at all of our research together and we're like, there's like some really cool technologies coming out, but it seems like Coinbase is still getting all the TVL and I don't like Coinbase. So I was like, okay, how can we trick users into basically, doing whatever they want on whatever chain they want to acquire some Bitcoin, like a Bitcoin denominated asset? And how can we trick them back to something that we think is like in a very opinionated way, like a very good use case or a very good like network to do this on? So the TLDR is we were building this research site. We saw that there was a lot of issues to like monetize it and scale it. Additionally, if you try to monetize Bitcoin Layers, I think it loses a lot of the independence and integrity that people really appreciate from it. So we decided to like take the research that we've built up over the last year and go in a product direction and try to actually, we have these more trust distributed systems coming out this year. And it's like, well, let's try to trick people onto those things. Like, how the hell are we going to get users onto the best systems? And that's kind of what we're going to be doing. So yeah. And then with Bitcoin layers, I'm still the lead maintainer of the project. Red's still doing like a lot of the engineering. Mike is obviously still working on the front end, but our core company resources are now going to be dedicated towards another product. And then we're going to try to make Bitcoin layers a more open source project.
So this new product, we have a name. As of right now, this is recorded February 26th.
26th, yeah.
So I think this may come out in the next couple weeks, maybe 3 weeks.
Oh, so yeah, it'll be announced on Twitter by then.
So it'll be announced on Twitter by then. Yeah. But the name is Lemondrop.
Name's Lemondrop. So
actually, I'll say like you can go ahead and describe what it is because this will not be released until after that.
So we're building this thing called Lemondrop. If you've met me in person, like I don't mind a drink at a night out. So we actually named We actually named it after the Lemondrop shot.
Okay, that's great. I love it.
So yeah, I don't know why we chose that. Like that's the name we picked. But Lemondrop is basically what we're building is like for US based listeners, there was this app called Acorns back in the day, right?
I remember it. It would like round up.
It rounds up. Yeah. So you buy like a coffee on your debit card for $3.50 and it rounds up like 50 cents to the nearest dollar to put into like a 401k account or something, right? So we're like, okay, there's always going to be this like notion in crypto of like degeneracy and shitcoining and whatever. And maybe like the meme coin cycle of Solana has died and Trump and Javier Milei killed it. But there's always going to be something else. There's NFTs in 2021. Before that, there were ICOs, so on and so on. So we have a thesis that there's always going to be crypto products that are always encouraging users to just go into the shitcoin KOL blender and try to come out alive. And the way we're thinking about it is instead of yelling at those people and telling them that Bitcoin's better money and that we should onboard them into like trust minimize layer twos, it's like, why don't we like just make it really easy for them and give them a really easy way to start accumulating Bitcoin? So Lemondrop in a first version 0 version is just going to be a transaction interceptor on Solana. You download it as like a browser extension. And then after you download it, you're able to set a percentage of how much you want to round up every transaction. So let's say you're doing a 10 SOL trade or a 10 SOL send. You want to round up 10%. The interceptor will take that transaction and add an additional parameter before it hits your wallet. And it will send an additional SOL to a vault that you can access in kind of a self-custodial fashion. And it goes to that vault. And then every 24 hours, that vault will auto-convert the SOL into a wrapped version of Bitcoin. We're going to have a partnership with a few different atomic swap protocols, starting with like Atomic Exchange, who have the Solana to Bitcoin L1 swaps.
Yeah, Matt Black.
Yeah. No, it's that's Atomic Finance and DLC stuff.
Okay, whoops.
This is Adam and Sylvie. Adam and Sylvie are building this.
Okay. There's a lot of name collision.
Yeah, so it's atomic.exchange, and what we'll do is we'll allow users to accumulate wrapped Bitcoin on Solana. And then after they reach like a certain threshold where we feel like they're in a position that they're not going to get priced out of the L1 in the future, like we'll recommend them to swap the wrapped version of Bitcoin into into Bitcoin L1, to like actual Bitcoin. So it's basically a way to give kind of degen traders on Solana, and we're going to expand this to like any number of chains, a way to accumulate Bitcoin. And that's like the first product. Yeah. And from there we have some cool ideas, but yeah, can talk more about those. But yeah, that's the first idea. The first idea there.
I want to stay on this because I have seen a lot of Bitcoin product development over the years, and it's gotten a lot of traction with what I would call like the hardcore Bitcoin crowd.
Yeah,
but that is not a very large market. For being realistic, that's a pretty narrowly defined like product scope. Mm-hmm. And if we look at almost the entirety of like top of funnel for new people into the broader crypto ecosystem, they don't come straight to Bitcoin. They join for things which are a little more sacrosanct.
Yeah.
Speculation. But what's interesting is I use the term like meme coin blender, right? And I've seen like in the past, post Trump, post Milei, post Melania, like there's like a new galvanizing like neo maxi like trend forming where a lot of these Solana Degens are like, I don't know what the purpose of all this is. I think I just want to stack some Bitcoin. Like I've seen them say this. And was this something you were thinking about prior to this recent in the past month trend? Or like, is this just kind of confluence of like the idea, the product pivot, and the secular trend in crypto?
Yeah. So I'll share actually the inspiration behind it. We eventually, whether we do this through our company or whether we do this like as open source contributors or whatever, like my goal at the long-term end of all this is to have something like Tornado Cash or Zcash or whatever on like a Bitcoin roll-up or something, right? So that we were like kind of brainstorming and like just generally just talking, right? Because like Red and I are both like super like interested in like privacy stuff. And we were like, okay, because I used to work on Zcash and like privacy is a bad marketing thing. Like saying like, oh, like your payments are private, or like this is like private money from like a mainstream marketing angle is not super, it's never been really successful. So like what we were thinking is like, how can we trick people into like growing the anonymity set? So that's where the Acorns idea came in of like, what if we just got people stacking Bitcoin on Solana and then eventually like had them click a button to like swap into like some privacy pools implementation on whatever chain, like Bitcoin kind of like connected chain. And then we're like, that's like a really cool, worthwhile thing that we'd be like super like proud of building. So that's where like the original thesis came around it of like, how can we long-term get people into something that we really care about? And then we think it's better for them. Like, I think having an anonymized kind of balance of Bitcoin is like a really cool thing. So that was like the inspiration. And I think just like people have kind of asked us over the last couple of months, like, yo, like, are you sure you want to do it on Solana now? And like, we're like, no, we're like 100%. But the thing is like, we want to expand this to like, you know, dozens and dozens of chains and then aggregate like all the users to what we feel is like, because, you know, we've been researching this category for a year. I feel like we know a little bit about like the trust assumptions for the various layers that we can potentially deploy this on. And we just want to aggregate users into a position where they can do stuff with their Bitcoin. They can not have completely custodial trust assumptions. And maybe down the road, we're able to like grow an anonymity set out of that. So that was like the inspiration. And it just happens to be that like Solana is now turning into like everyone's like just tired of meme coins now. But I think there's always going to be something. And I think a lot of like Solana users we've specifically talked to are crying out for something like this. Like they want a way to they want to play the game. It's fun. A little bit of gambling is always fun. But you should always try to not lose your entire stack in the process. So that's kind of how we think about it.
Let me tell you about one of the most slept on opportunities in crypto. Arch is building fast, composable DeFi apps on Bitcoin. Arch apps tap into the OG blockchain with by far the most liquidity and best brand in crypto. I've known the team for over a year. The tech they're building is solid and they are racing towards mainnet. There's dexes like Saturn, meme coins on funkybit.fun, instant loans on Cha-Ching, and so much more. Plus, they're rewarding testnet users. So join me in trying out Arch while it's still early. So let's talk a little bit about the how you built a team to get to this product. You say you've got co-founder Red, and you've tried to figure out over the past year, like what people do you need on the Lemondrop team in order to deliver and build this vision? Yeah. Talk to me. Have you ever been in founder mode before, or is this your first time? And what does it look like to build a squad to do these things?
Yeah, it's first time founder mode for both Red and I, right? I think like we have an engineer named Mike. He's pretty dope. He's on full time now. He's like our first full time hire. And I think the big thing is like, we're looking for people. Like we have a manifesto, actually. It's like pretty corny, but I read it.
I like the manifesto. It's a good manifesto.
I read it.
Top 20 manifestos in crypto.
I read it kind of like, you know, whenever because working in Bitcoin and crypto generally is like really, really hard. And like, I am not a huge fan. Like I don't mind like launching tokens or whatever. I'm not like against it inherently, but like, I get really, really sad when I just see the next like vaporware infra play come out. And
it's so disheartening.
It's disheartening to just see VCs like just get in on these early allocations and just dump on retail's head for like continuous, like infinity amounts of time, whatever. So we have this manifesto, and like the way we're thinking about like, if you want to come work with us or you want to partner with us, it's like, we think that ultimately all roads lead back to Bitcoin or saving in like a Bitcoin denominated asset on some application layer. Because we feel that like in crypto, it's been very apparent that like a lot of the use cases people are purporting, like Web3 style stuff, like it's just not coming to fruition. But there's always this like one solid, like call it like what is the lighthouse and the storm type thing of like Bitcoin always being there and always being like a safe haven asset. Also think it's a good hedge against like fiat currency inflation, like candidly. So like the way we're thinking about this is like we want to build applications that people actually use that improve their lives. And if like we don't do that, then like we as a company have failed. Like we could very easily, like to be completely candid, go pretend to launch some fake L2, issue out a bunch of token warrants and raise a massive val. Like we have like the background and capability to do something like that. But I think like we have this like thesis and manifesto of like, we're going to try to do something. We're going to try to make something that people actually use. And if it works in like the crypto arena and the crypto gambling arena, we want to extend that. Like we want to extend that into like actual mainstream markets and give people a way to consent and opt in to saving in Bitcoin without having to sign up for a centralized exchange account, without having to KYC to yet another like, another application layer. So like just integrate with the current tech stack that they're already in, integrate with the applications they're already using, and just let them click a button that says start saving in Bitcoin. In a very Acorn style way. And we feel like that is something that is like, if engineers or anyone else or product designers, whoever want to work on something like that, I feel like as a company, like we're very laser focused on like building a business that actually has users and makes money. And if we fail, I would rather fail trying to build a real business and giving it like the good college try than just like, launching some infra that we probably don't need in the end.
So, so you got this Acorn style thing, and you say you're throwing it into some kind of wrapped Bitcoin asset product. You're a little non-specific about that. You don't have to be specific, but
I can tell you which one it is. Yeah.
I want to hear that, but also like you've spent the past year studying these things and being, I would say, the voice on analyzing risk and revealing the dirty underbelly of wrapped Bitcoin assets. And so, you are kind of the expert on these, I would say. What considerations do you have? Why did you choose the current wrapped asset? And what's your mental model for these in general?
So I think long-term, the idea, originally I think we're going to have to do it with like the BitGo WBTC.
One specifically, or that style?
No, that's like the one we'll not launch with initially. I think the goal is to very quickly add like Coinbase Bitcoin support, and then eventually go into like maybe something like TBBTC, which is like a more distributed.
I just had Matt on.
A more distributed like kind of Bitcoin wrapper. I think, and we might actually candidly, we might actually just kind of launch with WBTC as like a beta thing. And then maybe add something like TBBTC on actually like full on, like I would say I guess mainnet launch or whatever. The reason you have to meet people where they are. And like these things could go under, they're completely custodial. You don't, while the vault is like technically self-custodial for the token, right? If the token becomes unbacked, then it's worth nothing and you lost all your money, right? And at any moment, any of these exchanges could steal that. But to reach users in the environments that they are in, those are the assets that are available to them. So the idea is that we can create a user interface that quickly onboards them into BTC price exposure through these wrapped assets and figure out a way to get them onto Bitcoin or another version of Bitcoin that's on like a more like liquid Bitcoin. I would say like liquid LBTC is probably a little bit better of a trust assumption than Coinbase, right? So figuring out ways to move users over to different types of Bitcoin. And that is an extremely interesting product and UX problem that we have to solve. And candidly, if we just have users stacking Coinbase Bitcoin and wrap Bitcoin, we failed. The company in itself, maybe it, does good revenue and it does good numbers and whatever. But the overall thesis of the company is meeting people where they're at, getting them in a position to have that exposure to BTC. And then through integrations with Atomic and other swap protocols, give them the opportunity to leave and move on to Bitcoin whenever they choose. And we're going to try to build a product UX that helps them make the decision really easy for them and as seamless as possible. So tons of risks. We're going to put Bitcoin layers reviews in the app.
Okay, there you go.
We're going to tell people that like very clearly that this is not Bitcoin, but the way I guess we can maybe like mentally justify that, right, is like it's no different than signing up for a Coinbase account and stacking Bitcoin.
Or an ETF.
Yeah, or an ETF.
It's actually more real price exposure to Bitcoin than on MicroStrategy.
Exactly. So what we're trying to do is like, we have to meet people where they are. They're on all these different chains. They're doing tons of transactions. I don't care what your personal opinion of is, like if these things are morally right or justifiable or whatever. Those are where the users are. Let's go to them, get them some exposure to BTC, and then give them the easiest way to onboard onto Bitcoin.
So Bitcoin layers, transition to open source. You're the lead maintainer. You're wearing a lot of hats now.
Yeah.
But you are taking off I'm going to drive forwards Bitcoin layers as the primary full-time focus, and theoretically move to trying to just maintain that. What does that look like? And what do you hope it becomes without it being your number one full-time focus?
So there's a couple things, right? Bitcoin layers is based off an incredible project in the Ethereum ecosystem. And when you look at that project's website, L2B and Ethereum, you look at the front end and you look at the website and you see project reviews and text and some charts.
And I'm like, data. Wow, this is great. This is one of the best products. They must be making tons of money.
Yeah. And I'm like, this is amazing. And then you look at the back end, right? The engineering work and the implementation of L2B, like I didn't really notice this until I actually dove into the code base and figured out how they actually like add projects and add project reviews and acquire data. The amount of engineering work that went into that is an insane amount. The tooling that they have is incredible. And candidly, like that it's not, you don't build that on a $50,000 grant, right? Like it is a massive undertaking and they have built an amazing thing and warrant all the funding and everything that they get to build that and maintain that. I think it's honestly an amazing project. For us, we could do something probably very similar, but I think the difference in Bitcoin is that Bitcoin is complete, like what we have found it is complete anarchy. And whereas I feel like Ethereum, while it's also a decentralized social ecosystem, they do have a little bit more of like a cohesive vision of what Ethereum should be. They have the EF, they have different organizations that are kind of driving forward this vision of like the roll-up centric roadmap, where in Bitcoin, we are just arguing with each other all the time, whether roll-ups are going to work, whether it's Arc, whether it's state chains, Lightning is the only thing that's ever going to be real. Fediment's going to take over everything, or like side chains or whatever. And this like this anarchic nature makes it really, really hard to drive not just social alignment, but like drive people towards having some like independent watchdog type project. Saying all of that, that's the context where like to have Bitcoin layers like exist as what people I think what I think they want. Like I don't know if they actually want it. It's like a massive undertaking. It needs to be a team of like 10 to 15 to 20 people. There needs to be like massive underhaul of the code base, you know, being able to automate a lot of the reviews that we're doing, which are pretty manual right now. So like it's just a really hard thing to build at the scale I think that people originally thought they wanted. But the problem with all of this is like, if you have this independent watchdog, you have to have social alignment on what the end game is for Bitcoin L2s and Bitcoin layers. And we just don't have that.
We don't have that.
We do, and we never will. And I think that's part of the beauty of this ecosystem and actually what makes it really, really exciting for me. But we're never going to have the alignment to be able to fund and generate like and spin up these projects that are essentially just documenting and yelling at people all day. At least L2B does a really good job of like offering a lot of solutions. We do not do that. We just are like, everything's bad. We
throw everybody in like one big Telegram group and we all kind of argue in that. And there's some productive discourse.
Yeah, it's really productive. And like the thing I think what we could probably do with it is my goal right now this week is to go to all the L2 teams and say like, hey, I want to spin this up. I want to create like another entity, like a nonprofit maybe or something. And I want you guys to either like give us donations so we can like go hire researchers and engineers to work on this. Or like, for example, I'm just going to pick on them because like I know the people at the Stacks Foundation, but like the Stacks Foundation very easily could just like put out a job like description and say, hey, I want to hire a researcher that 50% of their time works on Bitcoin layers and the other 50% works on like stack specific like research. And because it's an open source project, and like anybody can offer any type of grant or any type of job to anybody who wants to work on it. And we'll work with them on ensuring that their research gets added to the core code base, or they can fork it themselves and build another version. But I guess like the end goal, right, for me, for Bitcoin layers is to set up kind of a process where at least 5 or 6 or 7 kind of L2 or infrastructure teams kind of all agree on the end game that we all want to work towards, and then create a pool of funding that can help researchers and engineers go work on this open source project and ensure that it's staying up to date, it's maintained, whatever. I still work on it 2 to 3 hours a day. I'll probably continue that for the next, I'd say 3 to 4 months. But at that point, like, you know, I'm a co-founder of a company and have obligations to like shareholders and investors. So I have to like work on that. But I think the idea is to find a group of people who are, one, willing to continue working on it, and 2, projects that are willing to create a grant pool and help get it funded.
So you used one of my favorite words that for Bitcoin discussion and consensus and vision sharing, which is anarchic. Yep. I think this is probably underappreciated in a lot of Bitcoin discourse. A lot of Bitcoiners think, oh, well, we all agree on certain things like hard money and like the failure of the fiat system, and Bitcoin is bringing this, ushering in a brand new era of prosperity and moral alignment, which I can see like that being a dominant culture. But when we talk about like what Bitcoin looks like at a protocol level, and when we talk about things like L2s, and when we talk about things like just consensus discussion, a lot of this like this moralism and like this type of like Bitcoin culture does not really seem to apply to as well to this, because the discussion is very anarchic. It's very fragmented. And in the midst of this, we have you the other day mentioning that you'd be willing to take on another endeavor of being involved or championing an activation client for Bitcoin soft fork.
Yeah.
What is behind this? And what are your thoughts on just Bitcoin consensus anarchy in general?
Yeah. And I'm willing to share this because I told like an engineer last night who's like really well versed in like script and stuff. Like I was like, oh, this is my thesis. And then he originally was like, that is a horrible thing. You should never do this. And then I explained to him why, and he was like, okay, that's actually makes sense. So I'll give the TLDR. I'm not like an engineer by trade. I'm not a researcher, really. I would not consider myself like an actual, like I consider someone like Janusz Nick from Blockstream like a researcher.
Yeah, he's
like,
a really technical, very experienced, knows his way around all things Bitcoin.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm like more of just like, hey, like I'm just kind of like a reporter who kind of knows how some things work.
This is me. That's why I'm doing podcast stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And like, so for me, I was like, okay, cool. I've done all this research and I see the current state of Bitcoin scaling. Like I do know for a fact that Lightning is mostly used in a self-custodial fashion. I know a lot of people in that ecosystem are very excited about things like Fedimin and eCash stuff to extend it to more users, albeit with like custodial trade-offs. I know that all the Bitcoin side chains, rollups, L2s or whatever, at their core are inherently custodial systems. And I know that all of the usage of Bitcoin off-chain currently, even like, right, Babylon's going to launch soon, apparently, because they announced, like, I think they announced their foundation on Twitter. So I would imagine mainnet's like right around the corner. Like that is like a way to do like some weird like L1 staking script, but 90% of the volume is all from like LS custodial like applications that are taking people's Bitcoin and staking it on their behalf. So it all points towards very custodial solutions. And I think a lot of that also is due to like the limited expressivity in script. And we can't build more, I would say, trust minimized two-way pegs to these additional layers. So, and also improving different systems like Arc and Lightning that are currently existing. So kind of my thesis is like, okay, well, all my research points towards, there has to be something limiting all this. Because if we could solve this problem, we would have already solved it. And like, even like, I really commend the people working on BitVM, and I don't want to like, I think all of them agree, like we probably in the future should have we should probably have a soft fork to improve either BitVM or replace it with a more like Bitcoin native construction. Kind of my thesis is like, okay, there's like a couple activation clients that from what I've read seem to be able to, or not even activation clients, but proposals that seem to improve the trust assumptions and scalability related to some of these L2 protocols. So I'm just taking it on as like some random observer who has a couple hours a week free, who just wants to write documentation and do the same thing that I did with L2s and try to analyze the trade-offs and help people who aren't engineers and who aren't researchers understand this the best way they can. I think we did that with L2s and wrap Bitcoin assets. I'd like to potentially do that with some of the proposals going on. And also just for me, like I'd love to learn more about script, and I'd love to learn more about like how these things could potentially affect Bitcoin in a positive or negative way. And yeah, it's just something I want to do is like for free, like open source type thing. And I don't think advocating for any specific client or advocating for any specific proposal. I just want to help people who additionally care about pushing L2s forward and making them more trust minimized and analyzing all these things and helping them put that work out to the public and helping the community and the broader Bitcoin ecosystem ultimately decide. And if Bitcoin says no, and Bitcoin as a community says no, we just want to ossify, like that is like totally fine. And it's not what I want. And I would like more trust minimized L2s and stuff, but everyone has the right to make their own decision and figure out what's best. And if social consensus ultimately points towards ossification, then everyone additionally has like the right to exit and build on different systems or try to make the systems work within the limitations that they have right now. So for me, I just view it as an opportunity to learn more about these things and dive more into it. I think the evolution of like Bitcoin layers research would always go into that direction. And yeah, and just help people who are trying to offer solutions to really hard problems.
Hey, this is Will with Blockspace Media. And I don't know if you heard, but we just announced the second edition of our conference series, OpNext, now to be held at the MicroStrategy HQ in Tysons, Virginia.
That's right. After the success of our first scaling conference at Fidelity last fall, we're doing it again this spring, April 11th and 12th at the MicroStrategy HQ. I'm really excited for the programming. We have various stakeholders, industry, developers, and Bitcoin miners present.
So join us in April for open, neutral, and honest conversation about the leading proposals and technical solutions that will scale Bitcoin to the next billion users. No booths, no tokens, no shills, just Bitcoin and honest conversation.
You can find tickets and more information at opnext.dev or click below in the show notes.
Now, and in your kind of like bid for activation client considerations, you were non-specific about any specific suite of opcodes or specific proposal, which is interesting because I think I often lament what I see to be the just the decline of privacy advocates in Bitcoin. And if I'm understanding you correctly, this is one of your primary motivations in that you care about private transactions, the ability for users to have control over their own money, be able to do what they will. And when I consider the existing proposals that I see, whether it be OpCat to L-enhance to even the cat CTV check sig from SAC, the op perfection or whatever.
Okay.
Like that, I see these other things out there, and all of those do improve the privacy and self-custodial landscape.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw again similar kind of question topic back at you. Like, you seem a little more agnostic about which of these, and you seem to be more just, is there a feasible one that you can advocate for?
Yeah, it's more of like, okay, so I think having options to kind of like, not like, I guess like pick from is like the best. Like, you don't want to make it a situation where it's like cat or nothing, right? Like I think the conversation needs to be like, let's look at the various scopes and proposals that are available. Like, are some more mature than others? Like, could be completely bullshitting here, but I think like CTV is like further along of a proposal than like TX hash, for example, right? So maybe like a reasonable way to look at this is like, okay, let's activate CTV. Let's add some additional functionalities, maybe improve like the ability to do better self-custodial vaults, etc. And then look to bring on more introspection with like TX hash, right? So I think I'm not really, like, for me, it's more of just like an education thing where I'd like to learn more about the trade-offs and what these different things provide. I think ultimately for me personally, I do believe like with the types of like private payments that I want, adding that type of functionality into the L1, I think is a bit too risky. Like, I think like if like from the Zcash community, if people are very honest, like you can't audit the supply in shielded pools. That's why they have this thing called turnstiles. So like if there's an inflation bug from like the cryptography, like implementations in these shielded types of transactions, what a turnstile is, it's basically like you can only bring out the money that's like been put into the pool. So if someone infinitely inflates the supply and then takes out 1,000 like Zcash, then no one else can like leave the pool, and they basically got rugged and lost all their money. Like, this is an actual risk that I think we should be like, I'm not advocating for like shielded pools on the L1, but this is pretty battle tested cryptography. Zcash works. It's worked in production for a number of years. So like for me, I think the thing that I ultimately probably would lean towards anyway is a way to be able to verify like the state of like some off-chain protocol, like shielded CSV or some Aztec style rollup, to be able to have like a bridge between Bitcoin to this protocol. So if there's like a bug in the second layer protocol, it ultimately doesn't affect the L1, right? Like, yeah, there's a huge issue where now you have like a bunch of coins that are like now unaccounted for, and like there's inflation and people are trying to figure out who owns what or whatever. Like, but I do think like that is ultimately something that I probably still want. I still say in all my intros to like talks and stuff, I want Zcash on Bitcoin as a second layer. But I think for me, like it probably trends towards having something like CAT, because to have Zcash as the second layer, you need a snark verifier in Bitcoin. CAT seems like a roundabout way to have like a generic way to verify snark proofs. And yeah, I think maybe something like that combined with other things is probably what I would hopefully want at the end. But I also am not in a position where like, I think we have to add CAT by the end of the year. Like, I think like, let's see what we have on the table. What makes sense right now? What should we research more? Are there unintended consequences with these things, etc.? So that's kind of where my head's at.
So you brought up one of my favorite topics to try to talk about on a Bitcoin podcast, which is like ideas from other ecosystems. Mm-hmm. You come from Zcash, worked in the Zcash ecosystem, and you spend a lot of time looking at privacy tech on other blockchains, and probably just in general. What do you think is interesting out there in the world of privacy? And maybe does this relate to Bitcoin in any way, or is there just something in general that you think that's happening in the privacy world that you think might interest the listener, who probably half CoinDesk people, half hardcore Bitcoin technical people, half ordinals?
Yeah. So like, you know, I don't think it's like a lie or anything. Like, I think most people like are pretty aware of it. Like in the beginning, none of us are. Like all of us in the beginning, when we first tried to buy drugs on the internet, we're like, Bitcoin's completely anonymous. Fuck yeah, we can do whatever we want, right? Like, but then you read the white paper, and then you like read a little bit about it, and you're like, okay, it's not. And you think you can kind of beat the chain analysis game, right? You can beat chain analysis. I think some people can. I think people who acquire like Bitcoin non-KYC really understand how to use it in a self-sovereign way, access tools like Samurai, Join Market, etc., can probably have a good chance. But I think for most people, if you've ever bought anything on an exchange, if you've ever, you know, submitted a payment to like if you ever bought anything on exchange, ever doxed your identity associated with address or whatever, you're already in for a rough time. So the way I like to think about things like Zcash, why I find it so interesting, is like when people talk about zero knowledge proofs, they usually talk about them in the sense of like, oh, I'm going to like do this proof that kind of provides a summary in an argument that this is the actual truth of some system, right? But it's not private in the sense that like we're encrypting the data. Like what's really cool about things like Zcash is the only thing that you have to like reveal about like a Zcash transaction is the proof that basically hides the user, it hides the balance, it conceals everything about the transaction, but all it is providing this argument that something in fact did happen that abides by like the consensus rules. And like that's really, really cool and powerful, because what that means is we can have types of money. If you ever looked at a Zcash Explorer, like a shielded transaction, right? And everyone's going to yell at me, well, most Zcash, I get it. I know, trust me. I'm like totally aware that not all Zcash transactions are completely private. But if you look at a shielded to shielded transaction, like a Block Explorer, it's the most beautiful picture ever. You can't see anything. There's nothing. Like there's literally just like a transaction hash, and that's it. There's nothing about the sender. There's nothing about the receiver. And we're just using cryptography to prove that these things actually happened and that they abide by like the rules of like the rules of the chain. So for me, that is still like the number one use case for blockchains, is to provide this type of like shielded transaction environment where we can transact freely and anonymously for whatever we want. And as long as we pay enough fees to get that transaction included in the chain, and as long as we can produce the proof that it's a valid transaction, I think that's a really beautiful thing. And I think the biggest thing is like privacy loves company. And I think the idea of fragmenting anonymity sets is extremely problematic in crypto in general. And I think that if we could figure out a way to provide this type of like shielded transaction environment and build applications and useful things that aggregate users to these things, we can grow an anonymity set so that we all benefit and can transact without Chainalysis knowing what we're doing, because it's candidly none of their business. And I think, yeah, for me, that's still like the most important thing that I think we have solved. I think the other interesting side of the coin is people like on the Penumbra team, people who are building Aztec, the team working on DarkFi, are additionally figuring out ways to add more programmability to these types of transaction environments. So being able to write like types of like smart contract programs that also not only provide user privacy, but also builder privacy. So like, for example, Penumbra's big thing and big application as like a chain. So Penumbra, for context, is a Zcash style, like layer one blockchain with Zcash style privacy. They actually built like a decentralized exchange. And you might think that like, why would I need a private decentralized exchange? Well, no one can front run you. If no one can see what's going on in the mempool,
you get a better execution.
You get better execution. You get more fair, like you get more fair trades. You get, yeah. So like, there's this idea like you can't do Meevil if you can't see what people are doing. So like that's a really cool use case for privacy, to give people a better application and better trading experience, instead of just like going from it of the angle of like pointing the finger and saying you should have private money. Well, I agree with that. And I did that for a lot of years and yelled at people. I even yelled at Bitcoin people. I would say that like, let's actually meet people where they're at, build things that are useful, and try to aggregate them to like, you know, and like large anonymity sets so we can all benefit from it. So yeah,
it's really interesting because it's like the hardcore privacy people will build compelling privacy tech, and they'll be uncompromising, and there will always be a small vocal minority who's working on that. Mm-hmm. But, you know, to tie it all back to the top, which is, or the beginning, which is the top of funnel, increasing the anonymity set. This is where privacy people tend to just not be good.
Yeah.
This is like, probably weirdly enough, it, as with all things in Bitcoin and crypto, it's a social problem.
Yeah.
And this gets back to, I guess, how we can wrap this up, which is back to top of funnel.
Yeah.
And increasing the anonymity set. I don't have a specific question here, but I want to, you know, try to get you to kind of reflect on the arc of this conversation, going towards privacy, and now reflecting back on, you're focusing on top of funnel and like bringing people in and meeting them where they're at. How do you like, where do you go from here?
The biggest thing, like, you know, that guy who built that startup that's like launching planes at like supersonic speeds in the sky.
He wasn't even like a aeronaut. He just like taught himself aeronautics.
Yeah. And maybe I'll figure out how like zero knowledge cryptography actually works one day, because I think there's only still probably like 1,000 people in the world who really understand it. But nevertheless, to build products, in my opinion, you have to be extremely opinionated, and you have to be able to like understand that giving users a plethora of choices and giving them the, like when you download like a cryptocurrency wallet, the worst thing you can do is throw like 500 coins on it and throw them into this, like what we talked about earlier, like the shitcoin KOL blender of infinite opportunities and also infinite opportunities of loss. I think the most successful products are opinionated. I think people make bets, and I think they have conviction. And I think a lot of people, if you fail at that, right, it's better to fail at something and have conviction on it than not. So like when I think of our company, Arc, and the way we're thinking about this, the reason we started Bitcoin Layers for me personally was, can any of these things support a Zcash style like Bitcoin application? Like, are any of these trusts minimized enough to do that? We can debate whether they are or not. Like, I think the inspiration of BitVM was to build something like a Zcash style, albeit with very many different design choices, but a Zcash style payments layer. So, okay, we have that. Cool. And the answer is like, if that's the opinionated place where we want to take users and we feel is better, then we have to convince them and we have to meet them where they're at and give them a really easy opportunity to get into that arena. Because the issue with privacy applications a lot of the time, like, and I think Penumbra is obviously trying to solve this, what we mentioned earlier with the DEX, is like, we're just trying to make this like moral superiority argument, which I agree with and really appreciate. And I really love a lot of the advocacy that like people like Seth for Privacy, for example, who've inspired a lot of what I've done in my career, is like amazing and showing people the dangers of using completely fully transparent blockchains, in the sense where all transaction information is revealed. Like, that's amazing, but we also need to craft the products and meet people in the arenas which they reside, right? Like, just marketing our app on Twitter is not going to get users. We need to go into the places where they are. We need to go into the shitcoin KOL blenders and figure out, what do these users want and how can we long-term make that experience so good for them that going into something like a shielded pool anonymity set just makes complete sense. So when I like reflect on everything, it's like, okay, I have a thesis. I had a thesis a few years ago. I still kind of maintain that thesis. And how can I now get people like into this like thing that I think is really good for the world and I think provides not just a better moral argument. Like, I don't want to get on an EVM based Bitcoin rollup and pay you for like dinner, pay you back for dinner. It's a horrible user experience. I have to like shift wallets and move it through some non-KYC exchange that I'm not allowed to use in the United States. And then I have to like make sure I didn't use the same wallet that my Coinbase account's linked to. And I have to do this. And it's a complete nightmare. It's a hurdle. So why don't we give people a way to onboard into something that's better and provides them a better user experience in the long run? So that's kind of the thesis I have. And I think that really relates well to privacy. If and when we build something like that, you're never going to hear me talk about privacy ever. We're just going to, if we ever put something like that on chain, it's going to be on the back end. And you can, if you want to read the docs, you'll know it's there. If not, then you'll never know. And we want to make the user experience so good that users are just kind of, transacting in their everyday life.
Helping users avoid the shitcoin blender and Trojan horsing privacy and anonymity set growth into it. That's a pretty fun, cool thesis. And I'm really excited to see you build this over the next several years.
Yeah.
Janusz, disclosure, and I will say this at the top, I am an angel investor in Lemondrop. So these are also my genuine opinions, but also I just like having these kinds of conversations.
Yeah.
So
Thanks, man.
Cheers.
Cheers.